Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Awoken podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Rackison. Today our guest is Ting Ting. Ting Ting is the creator of the Guanjing Method, an intuitive fusion drawing on elements of yoga and alchemy, as well as Tai Chi and Qigong. Ting Ting has written a book and teaches workshops around the world. Here we'll have a conversation about her background, the origin of her method, the qualities associated with being a good person, what is God, gravity and its relation to Tai Chi and Prana, the difference, if any, between Chi, Prana, and Kundalini, being in balance, if the dinosaurs should return, and much more. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation and benefit. I certainly did. I feel more embodied um, based on some of the conversation we had around gravity and not resisting being here. And um, just overall, I found it personally an enlightening conversation. And there were some laughs along the way. So I hope you'll enjoy and benefit. And this is the Awoken Podcast.
Like all the doors were closing. I didn't really know what to do. And I had $500 to my name. And when I think of God, I don't think of God as someone that's in all white sitting on above the clouds watching everything I do. I think of God as the pervading energy, the pervading chi that creates life, that creates the polarities of that dance between yin and yang, created to help movements, to help stress, to help trauma held in the body, and to help people overcome challenges with more graciousness. And that's what Guanjing means. Guanjing means to mountain pass, the essence or spirit of the mountain pass. So moving through life's challenges with the graciousness of the wind and the water flowing through the most challenging mountains. Yeah, you can reach that by being a good person. You can.
Should we bring back the dinosaurs?
I don't think we should, just for the dinosaurs' sake. And when I started to do this, I went into another space, and almost just like I had been using the elements and spell books when I was a teenager in witchcraft to sort of alchemize and create spells, I felt like I was doing that through my body, through my movements. And thank you so much for having me on here. I grew up and was raised and born in China. And at a very young age, I moved to America. From there, I was in the East Coast, Philadelphia, and my passion had always been in the arts. And ever since I was little, I was very into witchcraft and the alchemy of nature and how to mix different elements together to create this energetic, sort of magical experience. And so, to cut a very long story short, my life became more of a gypsy life where I went from New York City to Italy to all throughout the US, in North Carolina, in Colorado, in Portland, Oregon. And then I moved to Bali for a while. And my transition from fashion design when I lived in New York City into yoga and meditation began when I was in Portland, where I would go every day. And I decided to take the yoga teacher training, and the teachers wanted me to stay to help them train future people who wanted to become teachers. So I ended up living in Bali for 4 years in deep devotion to yoga and meditation. And I decided to leave there because I felt like it was something that I was ready for a change. And so going from Bali to LA, I thought I could transition my business. And it was interesting because the energy of the universe was just blocking me completely. And I wasn't able to get any sort of work, whether that's through clients or whether that was even through a studio hiring me. And it sort of had me turn a hard left. Like all the doors were closing. I didn't really know what to do. And I had $500 to my name. I was freaking out because $500 does not last very long here in Los Angeles, especially if you go to someplace like Erewhon or something like that. A smoothie costs like $25. And so I was freaking out. And what it allowed me, though, was there was all this time. And that's actually when COVID had hit. Like, so everything was beginning to shut down anyway. And I decided to start this movement that was organic. And it was something that was deeply rooted in just my breath. And I was under so much pressure and stress financially that I didn't want to do anything else but just move my body organically. And when I started to do this, I went into another space and almost just like I had been using the elements and spell books when I was a teenager in witchcraft to sort of alchemize and create spells. I felt like I was doing that through my body, through my movements. And I decided to practice at the beach and at the park, and I didn't really care if someone saw me or not. And it was interesting because the universe is always giving us signs. And so when I opened my eyes after I practiced, I had not one, but a group of people every single time staring at me going, I love this. This looks so cool. What are you doing? Is this yoga? Is this qigong? Is this Tai Chi? How do I learn? And I looked at them and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, And I thought, okay, clearly these are messages because every single time I do this in public, people are fascinated by this. So what is it that I'm doing? And I actually had to sort of reverse engineer it where I would go into this space, I would get a camera and I'd film myself. And then I'd watch myself back and I realized, oh, I'm doing this same movement over and over again. And this is what I'm feeling and this is what I'm visualizing while I'm doing it. And so I started to record each sort of what I call them now basic forms. And I'd write them down and say, okay, I'm visualizing water here. I'm visualizing the sunlight here. And piece by piece, I started to realize I'm creating these specific formations of the body that create an energetic, almost an energetic mandala that moves chi energy through and surrounding the body. And so now, fast forward to this present moment, I'm hosting my first teacher training for this movement form, and I have students from all over the world. I go all over the world to host retreats and trainings based off of this movement form. And it really is, people are always like, is this Qigong? Is this Tai Chi? Is this dance? And it's funny because it's all of it and it's none of it. It's, I haven't even studied classic Qigong or Tai Chi at all until I decided to go to the Wudang Mountains to study last winter, just because I needed to know what the difference is between my form and these forms. It's not yoga because maybe there's certain structures, postural alignments that work with it, but even so, there's different attributes and different movements that are not like yoga. And yeah, it's been a beautiful unfolding into something that is truly, I feel, divinely channeled through me from the universe. And that's what is been created to help movements, to help stress, to help um trauma held in the body, and to help people overcome challenges with more graciousness. And that's what Guanjing means. Guanjing means to mountain pass, the essence or spirit of the mountain pass. So moving through life's challenges with the graciousness of the wind and the water flowing through the most challenging mountains.
Well, that was an excellent um, synopsis. That was an excellent origin story, and then, brief explanation of your Guanjing method, which I definitely would like to ask you more questions about. Listening to your background and how you got to this point, I have a couple of questions, which I imagine, any listeners or viewers may also have, just to fill in some parts. So, uh, you said you were born in China, and then at what age did you move to?
Five.
So five. And then how much exposure did you have then? Because you mentioned yoga and you mentioned witchcraft, which is more of a Western, I'm guessing Western occult witchcraft more, because there's, elements of shamanism and witchcraft, I guess, and sorcery, in every culture. But calling it witchcraft makes me think it's a little more Wiccan or oriented or something like that, pagan-ish, kind of Western magic-y. And then you mentioned yoga. But how much exposure did you have before? You answered part of the question, actually, when you said you went to the mountains. But how much, influence and exposure did you have from, I guess, Tai Chi or Qigong, um, prior to that, and then maybe growing up or later on
Oh,
in your
none.
adult life, or, so forth?
Absolutely none. I've had no exposure to Qigong or Tai Chi until very recently when I went to China to specifically study it. And my parents were never practicing it or talked about it. And I had been exposed to, it's interesting, you go to the bookstore or even to the library, the public library when you're a kid or a teenager, and you're looking at like, what books can I rent out? And I was always drawn I could care less about any other thing. History, I didn't care about nothing except for this witchcraft section where I just found all of the fascinating. I don't know if it's because it had more pictures or because it was more like
Hours. I don't know.
creation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it
yeah.
speaks to, I mean, there's something, more than meets the eye here, and you can affect it, which I think when you're
Yeah,
probably a little kid could be a very powerful idea, you know.
yeah, exactly. And so it's funny when people would speak, even before I really knew I wanted to develop this movement form, people would always say, "Oh, you move energy, you move energy," always telling me that I move energy, very powerfully. And so I was like, "Wow, okay, let me go deeper into this aspect of chi energy and to really understand it." And honestly, I went to China to find some answers because I was like, wow, all these people tell me it feels similar to Qigong Tai Chi, but it's different. And so I was kind of thinking, am I like a little bit of a knockoff? Am I just like, making things up and just not being in a weird way authentic? And so when I went there, it was such a beautiful reminder. And that was the biggest thing I got out of my time in China. I spent 2 months at the top studying with a grandmaster at the top of Wudang Mountains in a school. That translates to above the clouds, which ironically, I live in Topanga Canyon, and Topanga in Native American translates to above the clouds as well. So I went
Oh,
from above the clouds to
wow.
above the clouds,
Can't be a
halfway around the
coincidence.
world. And so when I was there, I realized that Qigong and Tai Chi stems from martial arts. It is a defensive, it's a defensive posture and it's a defensive art. And so all the movements are very low. You curl the tailbone under a lot. You're sort of protecting the internal organs. So the chest generally concaves, you keep the belly low, and there's a lot of blocking, and there can be a lot of powerful punches and kicks in Tai Chi and Qigong. Whereas Guanjing is all about releasing tension and releasing sort of almost the energetic knots that form into physical knots, physical tension. And so there's a lot of big openings in the chest and heart, big back bends, the release of the neck. It's much more feminine in the way that it moves. Tai Chi and Qigong can be quite masculine in the stances and the postures and the pacing. And in Guanjing, you're much more able to have a moment to really dance and to freely express yourself in the container of each basic form. So it's actually quite different. And I'm so glad I went to China to discover that.
At the same time, though, in your book, you do talk about Chi, and I think there are some practices that seem taken right out of like the cultivating Chi, just the whole rubbing your hands and
Mhm.
starting to kind of move the energy. I don't know. Some people couldn't see if they're listening to this, I guess, but um uh so was the book then written, I guess, after your visit to
No, it was written before.
oh, so you were aware of some of this stuff then before it.
I was aware. It's funny, it's really funny because I guess it's my own interpretation of I would describe chi and use the word chi as someone who was yogic would describe prana, right? Prana and
Right.
chi and life force energy, and even if you want to go scientific, the electromagnetic currents of our
Hmm.
body,
Oh
it's
yeah.
all the same thing.
Right.
Everything is
Yes.
made up of chi, everything's made up of prana, everything's made up of electric currents, and anything living has an electric field. And so, however you want to describe that, to get people to best understand what you're talking about, then that's the term to use. And so when I in say the chi cultivation in the book, it was more my way of finding how chi works on in a more yin based energy, like a little softer, a little slower, a little more internal. And then
So this is
Guanjing,
truly your exploration of
yeah, yeah.
that chi energy, which is exactly, I mean, that's why people say that it is similar to Qigong because, and I mean, from what I understand, there are martial elements to it, but um, the foundation of it is the idea of the life force energy and the chi, and the way that I think of that as kind of like the prime mover, in nature, like what
Yeah.
sorry, you froze for a second. I thought, but I shouldn't. This is not good podcasting. I can't do that. But what is moving everything at the most essential level. It does relate, everything um is just layers on the archetypal truth. So, and then if you actually even go back in the history of yoga in India, now scholars actually think that a lot of the influence of the idea of prana actually came from China, and came from the idea of chi. There was actually a lot of interchange between China and India, more so
Mhm.
that, they weren't so separated like people think. And that whole idea of the life force energy, which then was called prana, some feel originated, more in China, and I
Mhm.
guess Tibet and whatever it was called at that time. It was probably multiple different lands, I guess. But uh, yeah, so it's a real thing, and that's actually a lot of the questions I have um, are about. I talked about on our questions here. One of the I guess the very first question I have is what is life force energy and what are the names for it? So prana, chi, and then also I used to personally, and I think possibly incorrectly, also correlate it with the word Kundalini, which is a very popular idea in Kundalini yoga, which I'm quite familiar with. And the real Kundalini yoga, which is a whole other topic, not Yogi Bhajan's, corruption. But uh, yeah, so but recently I've actually found a teacher of Kundalini yoga who actually talks about it a little bit differently. He says that Kundalini is the meeting of the unconscious and the conscious. And as much as I would like to, be correct from what I was telling people before, I'm not sure if Kundalini actually totally does correlate directly with the idea of chi and prana. Um, But I do think prana and chi are very similar. And my question for you then is, do you have in your mind any distinction between the ideas of prana in yoga and then chi, and then maybe you have kind of your own synthesis, and how would you describe what is life force energy?
Well, first off, I wouldn't say, I there's always going to be different terms for the same thing, right? And so prana and chi is that pervading energy that creates all of life. And there's no right or wrong, or I don't even like to say this, it originated here and then this person took it. I think it all became a universal knowledge at the same time, and different cultures adapted different terms for it based on their culture. And I believe that, in one of the biggest principles of TCM is yin and yang theory, which is right, the darkness, the stillness, the softness versus the sun, the light, the quickness, the masculine. The yin is the feminine. In yoga, you can refer to that as sattva and tamas, right? The heaviness, the stillness, sattva, lightness, grace, all of this stuff. And then rajas in yoga is the dance between it. And when you think about Kundalini to me isn't exactly the definition of just energy. It's the dance between the yin and the yang, the dance between left and right, the dance between sun and moon. And when you look at like the way that in so many different pictures, the Kundalini, it snakes up and dances between the chakra system, and that's the dance of life. Um, I believe that, just to talk about Kundalini because you brought it up, um, I believe that Kundalini is not an energy that's created, but it's an energy that gets released from the uh, weight of gravity. Because think
Yeah.
of think of the body as a glass of water. The heaviest, densest, if you were pouring solvent or if you were pouring different liquids in it, right? They all have different densities. So they all begin to rest. The heavier densities fall down below, like more of the sediment and the rocks, because there's greater gravity. And so in the human body, if when we have traumas and bad experiences and car accidents or whatever, it is a traumatic experience. It's gravity that begins to weigh on us,
Hmm.
and it locks us into this sense of heaviness. That's why grief is a heavy emotion, because it is thick in density. And with Kundalini, when we begin to clear the body from this gravity, whether that's through yogic cleansing practices, whether that's through Guanjing, whether that's through breath work, whether that's through even being out in the ocean, whatever is healing to the soul, there's so many ways of healing, and there's so many ways that we can connect to our divine essence. It begins to cleanse and sift out that heaviness. And then the Kundalini, the natural energy, the natural dance of our life begins to rise. And so when we talk about what is life force energy is the dance of energy that allows us to move forward in life. It allows us to expand and grow. It allows us to become have that passion and desire to live a life that's fulfilling. Um, and so yeah, that's to me what life force energy is.
Well, that was a great answer. And I think from as I mentioned previous in the question, from the definition that this very powerful yogi, Kundalini teacher, and not from the Yogi Bhajan school, says Kundalini is the meeting of the unconscious and the conscious. So that is a little bit of what you were saying. The meeting of the polarities on and off. You know, I don't think the unconscious is necessarily off, but um, yes. So that definitely relates. And then I do also agree with the distinction that you were kind of drawing between that and just pure prana and life force energy. Um, uh, so, uh, how would you how would you say that we would go about cultivating our chi and prana then?
Well, there's so many different ways to do that, and it is based off of our constitution. So whether that's someone who's really on the go and fiery versus someone who's a little more sluggish and slow to get moving that's going to be the determining factor on how someone gets their prana moving. Generally, if someone's really an on the go type person, there's someone that loves to go to the gym, they love to go for a marathon run, they love to, their schedule is always packed. They have a lot of energy generating and circulating and moving through them. And it's almost as if it's like draining too much, right? Because there's too much energy being output. And so they actually need to tip it back so that more energy can be reserved while energy is still moving out versus someone who's more sluggish, someone who it takes forever for them to get ready, or they can't do more than one thing at a time and they get overwhelmed really easily. They need to learn how to get that fire, that heat going in the body. And so they need to sort of, and I'm saying this in very basic terms, in a sense, get that engine going, right? And so they need to do things that are more enlivening, maybe even a few jumping jacks in the morning, just to get that heat building in their navel center. And so it just all depends, because honestly, it's not about a specific way. It's all about coming back into balance. That's the most important thing. How balanced are you in your life? We are our most capable, we are our most lovable, we are our most powerful when we're in a state of balance in our bodies. And so if someone's out of balance, whether that be doing too much all at once, or whether that's someone slower, they actually tend to go to the things that keep them out of balance, because that's what we're used to. Think about someone who's like an alcoholic, or someone who's addicted to sugar, right? They want more of that thing that's taking them away from their balance. So it's actually up to us to we're responsible for our own lives to notice where in our life we're out of balance. Maybe we're like, oh, my life actually is kind of chaotic. I do pack too many things at once, which causes me to drive really fast, which causes me to almost get into an accident. Or, the guy that's sluggish is like, oh, I missed this meeting, or I missed this because I just can't get it together. Taking note and finding the remedy to it, which is the opposite of that. And so, yeah, the most important thing is learning how to discern when we're out of balance and take the initiative to do the remedies, whether that's going for a run or whether that's cultivating chi, to come back into that state of balance and harmony.
Well, yes, another very helpful answer. Um, I did want to follow up. I realized before on what you had mentioned about gravity, because later on in my questions, I actually had a question about gravity, and how that relates to life force energy. You mentioned it briefly before. I can say that I learned a little bit of Tai Chi from a very good yoga teacher, and I mean, sorry, he's doesn't know yoga at all. Actually, he's probably never, barely ever done any yoga, but legendary Tai Chi teacher. And I ended up, during the course of that workshop, really focusing in on gravity and how there seems to be some relation or correlation between gravity and life force energy. And I asked him that question and he kind of lit up and said, "Yes, yes, there is some relation." So in your practice and in your um exploration of things, if you can just delve more into how you think about gravity and maybe settling and alignment, um or whatever is going on with gravity. I think I was thinking about asking this question earlier, and also thinking about how actually everything has gravity. All matter has a gravity to it. Even a feather has a sense of gravity. It's just our planet is so much more massive, so it has more gravity. And just my own questioning. I mean, I don't know if, how much we'll be able to delve into the mystery here, but there seems to be some relation also between just space time and gravity and, matter and then chi. So I don't know if, that inspires any answer, but I'd be happy to hear whatever you got to say.
Well, again, nothing is good or bad. Everything is the most, I would say it's all about balance, right? It's all about it's all about finding that balance because I don't, there's a time in my life where I would get very esoteric with all these things, but ultimately for us to do these practices, the reason why we do practices such as Qigong or Guanjing Method or yoga is so that we can live a better life. And so sometimes living a better life requires us to be more present to this world, more present to our society, our culture, our neighbors, our capability and what we have right now, whether that's a job that you have that you don't really like, or even something that you're striving to with your business, right? At the end of the day, we do these practices to be better people, but also to be more capable and to flourish, to thrive, to feel a sense of prosperity in our lives. And so when we think about something like the topic of gravity and chi, I like to relate it to things that are more tangible and understandable. We're on this planet. We are human beings. A lot of people are like, well, maybe I'm an alien. And I'm not going to argue with that because I also feel very, I do connect with that sort of galactic experience as well. But when we get too into the ethereal, esoteric realms, it actually inhibits us to be able to function in society properly, to be able to connect with other people. That's the most important thing. How deeply can we connect with
But
each other?
isn't it also
And,
about finding that
and
balance? I think sometimes
yeah,
people, I mean, you're right that maybe a lot of our listeners and myself could be more grounded. But I think some people need to also connect a little bit to the ether a little bit.
of course, of course. And
And that's what
that's
you were saying earlier too, in a different.
yeah, yeah. And so gravity is not a bad thing. Gravity allows us to sink into this world.
Mhm.
Gravity is what is holding, a cup of coffee in your hand. It allows you to drink the cup of coffee, even. And so we can't think of something like heaviness as something negative. Heaviness allows us to be here in this moment, in this body. And Guanjing, my movement form, is all about accepting ourselves, accepting our bodies. But how can we direct life force energy? How can we connect with the ethereal realms while still staying connected and grounded to our responsibility here now? And so,
Maybe instead of resisting
yeah,
matter or, the physicality of our existence, by accepting it, you actually flow with it more and feel lighter.
yeah, exactly. And so there's, when people are get so deep into, and I did this too, when I was very deep in my yogic practices, I would go off and be in meditation, in silence and I was in the jungle in Bali, all this stuff. But life is the meditation. There is no like I'm meditating from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then I live my life and then I'm like a jerk the rest of the time. And then but I get my meditation at night. So then that's when I like make up for it and I can be present. No, life is the meditation. Every time that you interact with someone, that's the meditation. So when I compare it to gravity or lightness, it's our ability to be very deep in our bodies to feel the somatic qualities of how am I feeling? What is my energy like? What am I thinking? And how am I expressing myself to the outside world? How am I treating the tree that I'm touching? Or how am I treating, the water that I'm drinking? Like, how am I carrying this jug of water? Even, I think I forget what it's called, but it's a Japanese um form which they visualize every like inanimate object as having a soul. So how you're treating your keys, like how you're if you're tossing it unconsciously or the way you place things.
Mhm.
And so when we interact with our outside world with a sense of lightness and presence. That's how we actually connect to that ethereal realm in every given moment. At the same time, utilizing our actual bodies to move through space, to move through this world. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there's that collective gravity, right? The collective consciousness of where we are as a planet, in our vibratory experience of emotion. But we can raise that, or we can make that less gravitous when we're greeting someone in full presence, when we're talking to somebody in sweetness and softness and understanding rather than this harshness, this heaviness. And so I like to make sure that we utilize all these practices or all these theories of esoteric terms or whatever it is into how can we contribute to this world in a better way, which ultimately will is a reflection of how we're treating ourselves, right? And you see that with all of the conflicts in the war right now, and even past lifetimes. There's always going to be conflict and war, but the best that we can do, I mean, if you're listening or watching to this podcast, you probably have a pretty good lifestyle. You're probably not off somewhere in India and living in a shack, right? And so we're very blessed and we're very privileged human beings.
We hope to
Um,
reach everyone. So,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly,
they have cell
exactly.
phones. So,
Yeah,
even though
but
I've been there, like everyone's got a cell phone in India.
but but that's the goal. Is it's not just about us. It's not, oh, how can I send into like the most ultimate consciousness that is this universal whatever. Yeah, you can reach that by being a good person. You can reach that by being accountable for your actions and saying and letting your words match your actions and letting yourself be present to the situation, noticing how your actions affect other people. It's actually quite simple. At the end of the day, it's so funny. It's like spirituality and just being a good person are just one thing. But people like to separate that, right? People like to separate that, and it's this other thing, but that's the separation that's keeping the rest of humanity in separation.
I
That's
think
part
there
of it.
is an element though of what is your motivating story? What's your motivating factor for your being a good person? And some people might say that it's, fear-based, even if it's out of some organized religion, that, maybe they're going to be a good person because they don't want to go to hell or they don't want, Allah to be mad at them. And then there's, I would say, a more spiritual, genuinely spiritual, viewpoint of um, just, boundless compassion, more of the, the idea of the bodhisattva, or like, genuinely being a good person, not out of any selfish, idea. But I mean, to me, the real essence of any spirituality is non-duality. And um, so, yeah, I mean, what ultimately you find though is when your motivation, like you were saying, is just to be a good person. I mean, it's you who's experiencing that. You don't ever really experience life as compassionate as we can be. When we're here in the space-time phenomenon, we don't really ever experience life from someone else's perspective in the same way, obviously, that we do our own.
Mhm.
So, when you create the world that you want to see and create um, the kindness and the love in the world that you want to see, ultimately it's you who's living in that world more than anyone else.
Mhm.
So it's your mind. And but yeah, I mean, ultimately I do agree with uh, everything you said. And being a good person is definitely um, beyond any ideas or even what I'm saying. I mean, it's more important to be a good person than be able to explain it or explain it in some, spiritual way or in any sort of way. But yeah, I would say we could. Sorry, I'm not the best with this podcast format. If anyone's noticing, this is literally like one of our first podcast here. But um, So yeah, I guess that would be a good question then. Um, what is your overall concept of just reality? What's going on here? Do you, like the word God? Do you use the word God? Do you prefer a different word? Do you have like a sense of a holistic element or essence to nature? And then, beyond even the Guanjin method, just what do you think's going on here? And then how should we think about being motivated to be a good person? Why should we be a good person? And what does that kind of mean? But overall, let's take it one step at a time. So, what is your kind of cosmic worldview, or so to speak?
That's a very loaded answer that I'm about to give you. I mean, that's a big question,
Yeah,
first of all.
there's no wrong answer. I mean,
No, because it's all our perspective and what our life experiences are. And I never grew up in a religious home. I never even knew what a God was actually until a little later. And it was funny when I was my mom remarried a man whose family is very Catholic, and my grandmother took me to church, and I was like, "What is this? Like, what are we doing here?" So confused. It was funny. I saw the Bible and I didn't know what it was. I had no reference to like it's a holy Bible. It was actually quite funny. I had crayons because I was very artistic throughout my childhood. And I still paint now, but I always had crayons in my pocket. And I actually started drawing on the Bible because I was bored. And that was my first like time where my grandmother was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing? You're drawing on the Bible." And I was like, "What's a Bible?" And so in that sense, I was never really part of that sort of religious upbringing. And when I think of God, I don't think of God as someone that's in all white sitting on above the clouds watching everything I do. I think of God as the pervading energy, the pervading chi that creates life, that creates the polarities of that dance between yin and yang. And I believe that there is, to me, I've definitely had my own personal experiences with aliens, with sentient beings, with ascended masters that go beyond anything logical, like absolutely ridiculous moments, whether that's in the Great Pyramids of Egypt, whether that's in the Mary Magdalene Chapel in Glastonbury, whether that's out in the middle of the forest, whether that's moments in sleep and I come to sit up and I see these giant orbs dancing around my head in the room. Like there's definitely something beyond what humans can logically comprehend, and we try to rationalize it because we want to make sense of it. But sometimes that's why it's magical. Like it wouldn't be so magical if we knew every single reason what, right? Of, oh, this happened to me when I was 5 because then I can learn this lesson, so then I can be here now. Like it actually wouldn't be so amazing. And so whether that's like seeing 1111 all the time on your phone, or running into somebody that's going to shift your life, I believe that the more we believe, the more it happens. The more we believe in magic, the more magical things happen to us. The more we believe in the pain and suffering, the more pain and suffering that's showing. So ultimately, God is just a reflection of what our belief system is in our in our mind. And sometimes it's not even something we're conscious about. It's that subconscious programming, right? It's our unresolved issues that keep reflecting back to us over and over again until we decide to meet it, until we have the courage to face it. And so that's why practices like Guanjing is so important, because how do we show up in the face of challenge, whether that's challenging ourselves physically, whether that's challenging ourselves in our breath, whether that's challenging a challenging moment or situation with another person. But instead of running away and hiding from it, showing up for it and being like, okay, I can do this. I can work through this. And so God to me is just a reflection of those moments. And so when we get past that, I call that like a test or a challenge. Once we move past it, then we see that sort of reward, right? A lot of times you can relate it to relationships a lot. A lot of women can be in abusive relationships over and over again. You're like, why is it that I always pick these unavailable men? Why is it that this always happens? It's because it's reflecting that part of you that isn't healed.
Karma.
And so the moment that we choose to heal it,
Hmm.
the moment that those different situations will show up. And the same goes for our belief system, what we believe. If we believe in magic, if we believe in fairies, if we believe in aliens, if we believe in, like the amazing spirit guides that follow us, then that's going to actually show up. It's going to become real.
Yes, and I mean, there's a bunch of things that you just mentioned I wanted to um, go off on, but just briefly, before we get into the more occulty magical stuff, the idea you mentioned about cycles of lessons that people kind of go through, really relates to the just classical idea of karma that they had. In the West, we often think of karma. We have like misinterpretations of almost every single Eastern word, including meditation and yoga and almost everything for the most part. But karma, we often think of in the West as, I do good and good comes to me, or I do bad. But it was more, when you operate holistically, you operate without karma, and then you operate in a harmonious way, you operate without karma, and then when you operate in a kind of individual, can't speak, this is not good for the podcast, individualistic. I hope that's entertaining for people. Individualistic way, in a divided way, then you accumulate karma, and then so often the lesson that people are you know aiming to learn, or nature is aiming to learn through them, is what Pema Chodron kind of said, which is everything you experience in your life is exactly what you need to experience at that very moment, including talking to me and this, listening to us, and whatever's happening to you at this very moment, is exactly what you need to experience to learn to open your heart. Um, and then within that, there will be kind of these cycles of lessons, but ultimately, very often we find that the lesson, comes from compassion or sympathy towards others or ourselves, and then we're kind of freed from that cycle,
Mhm.
uh, or just think of things holistically in general. But as far as I mean, you mentioned some things that were uh, definitely deserve follow up, and um, so what I mean, when you had these experiences of, I guess, aliens, or um, was it just alien? I mean, did you invoke any other characters? I mean, you're right that depending on what, no one who's never heard of aliens usually encounters aliens. It's something in the subconscious that, like everything is coming from consciousness. So even what we think of as not dreamlike is, and then many systems, the Tibetan system and even the Aboriginals, I mean, it's just a dimension of dream. So I do think that things from the subconscious can become manifest and be experienced in a very real, physical, sensational way, which is what you're describing with the aliens. And then, but you're right, it could also be in different cultures. It might be a leprechaun, or a fairy, or an elf, or whatever character is in the subconscious, or Jesus for some people, or Babaji, if you're a practitioner of Kriya Yoga, you know. But tell us more about your experiences and what preceded that. Did you do any sort of ritual, or anything like that? I don't know. You said you were interested in the occult, so I don't know if there was any sort of conditions set before you had these experiences, or was it more just spontaneous? And then if you
Um,
just tell us more about that.
I think that, like I mean, there's so many different stories I have, but I would say when I started to deepen I mean, I've always had a fascination with aliens. I always knew that they existed. And so when I actually the first time when it started becoming more and more apparent was um I don't know if you're familiar with that. I think his name is Stephen Greer, and he does these special meditations, usually in a group, where you bring your heart's energy out into the sky as high as you can go, and then feel if you can find some energy that matches that, the resonance of your heart. And then when you do, you guide them back through visualizing where you are in the globe back to that specific moment. So I remember I did that once when I was actually on a hike, and I didn't even have my cell phone with me. And
Sorry,
you know,
you were what?
I was on a hike,
On a hike. Okay, yeah.
and I decided to do it. And I was like, oh, whatever. Probably nothing's gonna happen. And I'm on this hike, I get into the meditation. I actually get into it quite easily. And I'm sending my awareness down on the globe. Oh, here I'm in California. I'm here in Topanga Canyon. And here I am on the little dot, like imagining that you're just that Google Maps zooming in closer and closer. And I was like, I wonder if anything would happen. And I look up and I see this figure in the sky. And I'm like, that's a weird shape. And then I go and because there's another plane on the other side of me. So I turn to look at the other plane, and I turn back to look at that thing, and it's gone. And I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And then I look back, and then I look back again, it's there again. And it was just happened for a few, those are like split-second moments, but then it disappears again. I'm like, whoa, I definitely saw something in the sky. And then it got really interesting because I was hosting a retreat in Mexico, and we were in Sancon Biosphere Reserve. So there's no one around us for miles. There's no planes flying by, nothing. Um, I had the ocean on one side, and we're on sort of like this peninsula area. So the ocean's on one side and the bay is on the other side, and the house is in between. So in the sunrise was at the ocean. So we did Guanjing at the ocean. Sunset was overlooking the bay. So we did at the bay. On the third night, we're going through the movements. We're going through this thing called radiant jing, and the energies like this. And we did a heart meditation on sending our heart's light out to all the pain and suffering in the world, creating a web of love for the planet. And we open our eyes, the sun's setting, there's not a cloud in the sky, and all of us are in silence watching the sunset. There's about 15 of us. And all of a sudden, there's two figures like lengthwise that show up like this. One's kind of slanted and one's straight down. And I'm looking at it, and at first I'm like, what is that? That looks like that's a weird way for a plane to be going. Like that doesn't look right. And then it starts moving across the horizon line like this. And all the hairs on the back of my head start standing up. I'm like, that is not natural. And I slowly start to turn around at the people on the retreat, and their jaws are to the floor. And I'm looking at it, and I'm realizing both of those shapes are in the shape of flying saucers, but they're horizontal. They're vertical. They're not horizontal on the horizon. And it starts coming at us like this. And I'm clearly seeing flying saucers, and they're huge. They're huge. They're so close. I've never
Were
witnessed
they
any.
were they physical in this
Yeah,
dimension, or
yeah.
was
They
it
were
more
they
like
were
a light?
physically there. It was solid objects in the shape of flying saucers. And but no one was scared. Everyone's really excited. Actually, every single person had a giant smile on their face. Like, this is so awesome. And then it starts getting crazier. Then they start mimicking the movements that we were doing. It starts going into a figure eight position, the way that I showed people how to do the figure eight with their hands. They start moving in figure eight positions. Then it starts going to flip, and it starts creating a full circle, and it starts coming even closer to us. And people are crying. I'm so glad that I had people around me, or else I would have thought that was crazy. I'm like, no, everyone is experiencing the same thing. We're all experiencing the same thing. And the energy that I felt from this flying saucer, even though it wasn't like on a megaphone or something, I heard the message. We're so proud of you all. Look how powerful you are. Look what you can do if you send your energy, your heart's energy out. Like people really do feel that you are changing. You're helping to uplift the world. And then boom, just disappeared out of thin air, just gone, completely gone. Both of them just vanished. And so, and I've had multiple experiences, all very different, but all very like wild. And so I think that, I think that these beings are out there. I think that they're here to support us in our growth as mankind. I think that practices like Guanjing help our embodiment of this energy, help us to feel more capable, help us to feel more empowered. And it's important to feel empowered, but from a place that's healthy, from a place where we want to help not only ourselves but other people. And if you're whatever you're doing, whether that's Guanjing, whether that's yoga, whether it's meditation, whether that's dancing, whether that's painting, whether that's forming your own business, if you're in some way helping other people or helping animals or helping the planet, you are definitely going to be supported by the universe. You are definitely going to be uplifted. And so whatever that form that takes, just having that belief in ourselves is really important.
Absolutely. Um, and and it's very profound, I suppose, awakening sort of experience, um, and deconditioning. Um, but I would just follow up by asking, I guess, I mean, how would you feel that how did I suggested that I was activating and everything, but how did that experience and the other kind of deconditioning experiences that you've had, experiences where the consensus reality just faded away, how has that shaped your path? And then um, just anything you want to say on that topic.
Um, I guess some of my experiences have made me realize that life is actually truly very magical. Like it's these energies, beings, whatever you want to call them, whether they show up to you as fairies or as spirits or as even ghosts or whatever it is, the more that you allow them to help you, the more that they'll help you. And again, I like to bring it back to like physical, being on the physical plane, because we are on a physical plane. We don't have to deny our physical body, and we don't have to deny our spiritual body. It's all the same. We are in this physical vessel so that we can experience something ethereal, so that we can experience life. And so when we think of ourselves as a reflection of what you would say is God or universal awareness or whatever, once you see yourself as a reflection of this dancing energy, we can dance with life. Things don't become so heavy. Things don't become so disastrous or gravitous. We can take life with a sense of sweetness and wholeheartedness that we never had before. I think one of my favorite sayings by I think his name is Desmond Tutu.
Yeah.
Uh, he said, we are able to experience deep joy because we're able to experience deep heartache, but we don't let that heartache embitter us. And so that's what I feel like when we work with that energy, allowing other people or beings help us, we can begin to have a capacity to really deeply feel life. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And that's what Guanjing helps us with, because you're allowing yourselves to deeply feel the emotions that you might be holding on to in your body, and you're giving it an opportunity to let it go. That's what all these basic form postures is about, the letting the recognizing and releasing, so that our bodies have more space to hold peace and to hold contentment.
So would you say then that um, the correct thing would be then to cultivate feeling and try to feel as much as possible and then transmute that? Or there's also this very, popular idea of stoic-ness and non-attachment. Um, the answer may be a balance in between, but I wonder, how do you view emotion? And then in the Guanjing practice, you alluded to it, but how are you thinking about transmuting that emotion and um, Yeah, are you trying to feel as much as possible? Are you trying to, focus on, frame things in a positive way, feel positive emotions and not as much go into the darker emotions, or how do you view emotion just in general?
Emotions are just like waves. They're just like waves, and we're the ocean, and sometimes things are wavy, and some days things are pretty calm and clear. And I don't believe that we should go around poking around trying to create an emotion if it's not coming from any place. Like emotions are naturally are waves that wash over us. And so, people, I'm sure everyone's experienced this days where all of a sudden you like feel sad and you're not sure why, or maybe it's the weather changing, and other days you're just like giddy and happy and silly and you feel like a little kid and you're not sure why, right? um and just not being attached to you becoming that emotion. I think there's a lot of attachment. People are just like, oh, I'm just
Not be
like,
attached to you becoming that emotion. I like that
yeah,
line. Yeah.
yeah, you're just the person witnessing the emotion wash over you and just letting it again wash over you without getting stuck in it. Even in Chinese medicine, it's
But do
actually
you
not.
want to feel it? Do you want to
Yeah,
get
you
into
want
the
to feel it,
feeling?
sure, but don't become attached to that feeling. Like, don't even in Chinese medicine, it's not actually be having joy, having too much joy isn't a good thing.
So
And
you're
so
drawing a distinction between non-attachment and stoicness then.
yeah, yeah, it's really important just to allow yourself to feel it, to accept it. If you want to move it, you can move it through Guanjing, through the movements, through however you want to allow that to release. Maybe it's something more heavy like grief or sorrow, right? Those are going to be heavier. So doing things that sort of uplift your spirit, that allow you to relax your body, because when those emotions show up, it becomes tension, right? There's this like tenseness. Maybe the chest concaves, maybe there's pain in the pelvis, maybe your shoulders slump, maybe you just have less energy because it takes more energy to keep regenerating that emotion. Just like it does takes more muscles to make a sad face, right? Than smiling. It's the same thing. So knowing when to use modalities that allow you to move through it with more ease than to get stuck in this the stagnancy of that heavy emotion.
Yes, and with your practice, I mean, we know the body is the mind, and by consciously moving and cultivating the energies in the way that you are, I mean, you're attuning yourself, and perhaps, as you mentioned, you know, the larger self, the oversoul, and just nature itself, um, through the movements
Mhm.
and through cultivating your own state of mind.
Yep.
Um, so stoicness, though, yes or no?
I mean, if I'm not against it. I feel like there's
I don't know if
definitely.
I'm against it, but I don't know if I'm for it. I mean, I think that, you know, what you were saying, I mean, we definitely want to feel. And then, well, I mean, we'd have a more harmony comes from feeling, I think. I mean, compassion obviously is a big concept in Buddhism, and in general, it's beneficial. So yeah, I think feeling is good, and music is way better when people feel, and I'm into feeling and transmuting it. The original idea of Tantra was just to turn everything into God and feel as much as possible. But by God, they meant holistic essence and not like, one particular being. So, okay, if you want to wrap it up though, let's ask some of these fun questions that I have. Let me see if there's any more particular questions for you. Um, I mean, just things that I noticed through looking through your book. Some of the movements do seem um, very not necessarily yogic, but like specifically Kundalini yogic. As far as uh, you there? Sorry. Oh, sometimes it looks frozen for a second, but then I notice the fan is moving in the background. Um, but Yeah, in the book there are some particular movements which I kind of want to ask you about and just your experience of them. And um, there's some back bends
Mhm.
where you're just bending back, and in this Kundalini yoga system that I've been learning, um, it's done in a way very often where it's sort of altering your consciousness a little bit. So my question is more about what's going on in your consciousness when you're doing particular movements. Do you feel a heightened energy during any particular moments, like the back bend, like that? I mean, what happens often, even if you just do it right now, and if anyone at home wants to try it, but if you stand up and take a deep inhale and just bend backwards, almost in a camel type pose, you'll start to feel a certain sensation um, rising in you, elevating. And that's actually Kundalini. It's a little bit close to unconsciousness. There's a people say, "Oh, I'm getting lightheaded" or something like that. It's actually very much related to that. So I wonder in your practice if you're manipulating that at all, or delving into sort of the unconscious or more esoteric elements beyond just what's on the surface there, as far as the postural movements.
In different back bends, we're doing utilizing different movements within the back bends, not just a back bend itself, and actually how you lengthen your spine and how you hold your chin has a lot to do with that effect that you would say would be this sensation of unconsciousness or this feeling
The
that arises.
merging of unconsciousness and consciousness. But yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
sense of you're starting to like be, we talked about being grounded, but there's this sense of the beyondness, too, which can be heightened. And then
well, the reason why that's actually happened.
but
So
then they say, oh, during this, there's a genuine Kundalini response, which again, in our Western society, what we talk about as Kundalini yoga is really corrupted. And there's actually even a documentary. I don't know when people will hear this, but coming out later in October on the Kundalini yoga and Rama yoga, which was in um, Venice, if you remember, and but also Yogi Bhajan, and just how that whole uh, really lineage has corrupted. And it's also corrupted the idea of what was Kundalini yoga in India for thousands of years. Um, but it's a real thing, and there is a Kundalini response. And they talk about, when you have this Kundalini response, um, to stay grounded, think of your feet, do the root lock. So it's very much about, stretching yourself and being as grounded as possible, and also at the same moment, kind of being as boundless as possible.
yeah,
Um,
just to answer this question quickly, because I need to get to a meeting, is when you're backbending, a lot of people tend to not backbend properly, and so their pelvis is more tucked back, and to try to accentuate this feeling of a bigger backbend, which you don't want to do. We want to lengthen the lumbar spine and create as much, just as uh someone who's creating a perfect archway over a door, it has to be an even distribution of weight along the whole spine so that it remains not only lengthened so that the energy can move, but also you can find that beautiful opening of the chest and the heart. That's what a back bend is, right? It's the opening of the front of the body, and the front of the body is the yin channel in Chinese medicine. And so when we're bringing energy to the yin, it becomes young, it becomes invigorating, it becomes
in the
uplifting,
vagus. I mean,
it
what it's really
becomes
doing is activating also the vagus nerve. Uh,
yes. And but you can also activate the vagus nerve a million different ways. You can
well, that's what I'm
activate
saying. Yeah,
vagus nerve chewing gum,
right. And
you know?
to activate the Kundalini response, it doesn't
but
really have to be in a back bend.
but
It's like a
but I'm
breathing
actually
technique.
very opinionated about the doing the whole back bends in yoga, because a lot of times they tell you, relax your neck and just let the head hang. And the reason why people experience lightheadedness or the sensation of leaving their body is because they're pinching the nerve in the back of their neck, and it's actually causing a stagnation of energy to flow through. You're cutting off
But
circulation.
that's not on, maybe we'll cut this part out. But that's not actually fully what I'm talking about because yeah, I mean, there's the lightheadedness, like where you hang upside down or something like that,
Yeah.
or that thing. But there's also this Kundalini response, which is, the breath of fire. I've only been learning about this recently, which is why I probably shouldn't have like thrown. I just was trying to force it in here because it's like my current, thing that I'm kind
Oh,
of practicing and learning is this older kind of style of Kundalini yoga. Um, but like I said, the what people often think about is the breath of fire, and that is you can kind of start to feel it from that. But there's other techniques and breathing techniques, like this one called Ajagari, which it's very powerful. And I can tell you how to do it. I could tell our listeners, but I don't know. Just very quickly, you take all the breath in, expand as much as you can, and then take it basically all the way on the other direction. So you're taking the blood and all the vital energies out and then back up and redirecting them. Um, so anyway, it's a very powerful response. And then there are elements of that, like just with doing the back bend. So that's what I was just wondering when I saw in your book kind of looked like some of the things I'm doing. But do you have 2 minutes? I wanted to ask my fun questions if you have time.
but I have to go like in literally 2 minutes.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
You should have told me as a particular, I meant to ask before because that's a good thing to know. Like if we have a cutoff time, I would have
Oh,
tried
because
to.
your meeting said 1 to 2. So I like
uh,
scheduled my day for the hour.
That was just how it just puts it in there. It just
Oh,
automatically
okay.
puts an hour. Um,
Oh, okay.
so but I didn't think I didn't have any idea it would go I any particular amount of time. So, um, but okay. All right. And now we're in the fun questions portion of the podcast. So, rename the sun. If you had to rename the sun, there was some law passed. It couldn't be called the sun anymore. What do you think would be a appropriate term or word?
I would say light bearer.
Okay. What is your earliest memory?
In China, I would be running around the apartment. It was so hot and always begging for an ice cream or a popsicle.
And um, describe, I guess, you said that you grew up in where in America though?
In Philly, outside of
Would you
Philadelphia.
consider that to be more your hometown, or where would you consider as like home?
I would say wherever I am in the moment, but because I've lived in so many places, I wouldn't consider that home. I don't feel like I think home is where you want to be in that moment. So right now, Topanga is home, but in a few weeks, Egypt will be home. And so I think it's just wherever we feel comfort and connection in that certain time in our present moment.
That's a very spiritual answer, and yes, I agree, the present. But I kind of just meant like, I don't know, where do you have nostalgia from, or where did you kind of like grow up, and where were you a kid at?
I was a kid outside of Philadelphia, but again, I don't feel so much nostalgia because I was teased a lot there and I don't have amazing memories there. So I wouldn't consider that my home. I have
You're not a big
nostalgia for,
Philadelphia Eagles fan.
no, not at all. Not at all. I would say either Portland, Oregon or Bali brings a lot of
Mm,
nostalgia to me.
okay. All right, here's a good question then. I mean, we can end on this one or one more, but okay, so vividly imagine you're in a block of ice. You're surrounded, totally encased in ice, and you must choose a phrase to cast a spell of love to melt the ice. What do you say?
I would say creating a web of love connecting my heart to all of the hearts on this planet and beyond to break not only this ice, but also break open our hearts so we may feel a limitless love.
All right, two more questions. If we could, should we should we bring back the dinosaurs?
Mm, I don't think we should just for the dinosaurs' sake.
That's out of compassion for the dinosaurs. You don't want
Yeah.
to
No,
expose them to
not in
our
this age. No, they'll probably
Trump-oriented
exploit them,
modern
and then they're
society.
like riding on the dinosaurs. Then dinosaurs are
Oh,
dying because there's not enough land.
okay, and then this isn't in the book, but I will just end it with if there's one essential message, one lesson, or if no one else remembered anything else from this podcast, what is the what is the wisdom that you would share?
I would say the most important thing would be to experience life through the radiance of our hearts, to be communicating and receiving from our heart space rather than through our mind or through any other emotion, because the heart is where the seat of the soul is. So anytime anybody's in doubt, anytime anybody's in indecision, anytime there's a challenge between whether that's yourself or someone else, let it rest in the heart and see what how the heart would respond to that.
Well, I appreciate you for this wonderful conversation, and I'm sure everyone was captivated, and I think it was actually a very good conversation, and people probably benefited from it. So hopefully, a lot of people listen to this, and yeah, stay tuned. We'll may have Ting Ting back at some point in the future. We'll be having Ting Ting at a workshop at the Awoken space. I think we scheduled it for uh, November 2nd, 2024, whenever you're listening. Um, but yeah, and she can also be found on the internet and maybe you want to plug your website or where can
Yeah,
people find you?
Guanjing Method. So that's either Instagram, Guanjing Method, Guanjing Method. And then the website is guanjingmethod.com.
And yeah, it's very effective, very valid method that would benefit absolutely anybody. So we're grateful that out of compassion, you're here to share it with all of us. And again, thank you for this conversation and have a great rest of your time and timeless
Thank
time.
you. Bye.
And
Thanks.
take care.